The massive doors of the council chamber slid open with a deep hum that echoed through the vast space. Taeyang stepped inside and stopped for a moment, taking in the sight before him. The chamber was enormous, shaped like a perfect sphere with platforms floating at different levels. Each platform held delegates from different worlds, different species, different corners of the galaxy. Some platforms glowed with soft blue light, others pulsed with warm reds and oranges. The air itself seemed to shimmer with translation fields that turned thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Taeyang walked quietly to the human platform, a small circular space near the middle section of the chamber. It was not high up where the important species sat. It was not low down where the newest members were placed. It was simply in the middle, easy to overlook. He liked it that way. Hana was already there, setting up their equipment. She looked up as he approached and smiled. "Ready for the show?" she asked. "It will be interesting," Taeyang replied, settling into his seat. He was a tall man with gray starting to show in his dark hair. His face was calm, the kind of calm that came from seeing many things in life and learning not to react too quickly. He wore a simple dark suit, nothing fancy. Next to the elaborate robes and armor of other delegates, he looked almost plain. The chamber filled slowly. Taeyang watched as each species arrived. The Vornth came first, their crystalline bodies reflecting light in rainbow patterns. They moved with precise steps, every motion calculated and efficient. Their leader, Ambassador Krell, was a tall structure of clear crystal with veins of blue light running through his form. The Vornth never wasted movement or words. Everything they did had a purpose. Next came the Silcathi, led by matriarch Thessia. Her body was long and serpentine, covered in scales that shifted between green and silver. She moved through the air itself, swimming through the atmosphere as if it were water. Her eyes were ancient, holding the weight of thousands of years. The Silcathi had built civilizations when most species in this room were still learning to make fire. Then the Dracon entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise. War Master Bruthen was massive, easily 3 times the height of a human. His scales were dark red, scarred from countless battles. He walked on powerful legs, his tail sweeping behind him. When he moved to his platform, the metal creaked under his weight. The Dracon had never lost a war, not one. In 10,000 years of history, they had never been defeated. Other species filled in around them, the insect-like Felorians with their clicking voices, the crystalline Quen who barely spoke at all, communicating through light pulses, the gentle Narathi, plant-based beings who moved slowly and spoke even slower, the aquatic Mercian in their water-filled spheres. 47 species in total, representing millions of worlds and trillions of living beings. A tone rang through the chamber, pure and clear. Everyone fell silent. At the center of the sphere, a hologram appeared. It was the Arbiter, an artificial intelligence so old that no one remembered who built it. The Arbiter had moderated these councils for thousands of years. "The assembly is called to order." The Arbiter's voice filled every corner of the chamber. "We gather for the succession debate. The Lumini, who have served as stewards of the galaxy for 800 years, have chosen to step down. We must decide who will lead next." A murmur ran through the assembly. This was rare. This was important. The steward species held enormous power, guiding galactic policy, managing disputes between worlds, controlling access to shared resources. Everyone wanted this position. "The format is established," the Arbiter continued. "Each species may present their case. At the end, we will vote. Let us begin." Ambassador Krell rose first. His crystalline body caught the light and his voice rang out clear and logical. "The Vornth offer efficiency. We have built the most advanced computational networks in the galaxy. We can process information from 10,000 worlds simultaneously. We can predict resource needs before shortages occur. We can optimize trade routes to reduce waste by 37%. Logic and efficiency should guide the galaxy, not emotion or tradition." He presented charts and graphs, data streaming through the air. Everything he said was backed by numbers, by proof, by calculations. The Vornth way was the way of pure reason. When he finished, Matriarch Thessia rose, her body coiling gracefully. "The Vornth speak of efficiency, but the galaxy is not a machine to be optimized. It is alive, complex, full of needs that cannot be calculated. The Silcathi have watched civilizations rise and fall for 47,000 years. We remember the mistakes others have forgotten. We understand that true wisdom comes from experience, from patience, from seeing the long view. Only a species that has endured can guide others through the storms ahead. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. She spoke of ancient crises, of wars that nearly destroyed the galaxy, of plagues and disasters that the young species had never heard of. She spoke of how Silkathi wisdom had guided the galaxy through dark times before. Then War Master Bruthen stood and the chamber felt smaller. The Vornth speak of logic. The Silkathi speak of wisdom. I speak of reality. The galaxy is dangerous. Pirates raid the outer colonies. Unknown species probe our borders. Resources are limited and species fight over them. In dangerous times, only strength maintains order. The Draken have protected the weak for 10,000 years. We have never failed in our duty. We have never been defeated. Power respects power. Give us the stewardship and no one will dare threaten the peace. His words were simple and direct. No fancy charts. No ancient stories. Just the truth of force and the promise of protection. Species after species presented their cases. The Felorians spoke of cooperation and collective decision-making. The Mercian talked about environmental balance. The Quen demonstrated their mining efficiency. 12 species spoke on the first day, each believing they deserved to lead. Taeyang sat quietly through it all, watching and listening. He took notes on a simple tablet, but mostly he just observed. He watched how species reacted to each other. He saw the Vornth calculate responses before speakers finished. He noticed the Silkathi's slight head movements when they disagreed. He saw how the Draken's claws flexed when someone mentioned military matters. Hana leaned over during a break. We're supposed to present too, you know. Should I prepare something? Taeyang shook his head slightly. Not yet. Let them talk first. They barely know we're here, Hana whispered. The humans are just background noise to them. I know, Taeyang said, and he almost smiled. That is useful. The first day ended with no decision. The species broke into groups, talking in clusters on their platforms. The Vornth gathered with other technological species. The Silkathi drew the ancient species to them. The Draken stood with the military powers. Lines were already being drawn. Taeyang watched it all happen. He saw the galaxy dividing itself, each species so certain they knew the right answer, each one so sure they deserved to lead, each one unable to see past their own perspective. As the chamber emptied, Hana packed up their equipment. What are you thinking? She asked. Taeyang looked around the massive sphere at the empty platforms at the fading lights. I am thinking that everyone is asking the wrong question. What do you mean? They are all asking who should rule. No one is asking what the galaxy actually needs. He stood and picked up his tablet. Come on, we have work to do. What kind of work? The kind where we listen instead of talk, Taeyang said. The kind where we learn instead of teach. They left the chamber as the lights dimmed. Behind them, the Arbiter's hologram flickered, already calculating probabilities for tomorrow's debates. But the Arbiter, for all its processing power, could not predict what the quiet human was planning. No one could, not yet. The second day began with tension already thick in the air. More species presented their cases, but the pattern was clear now. The galaxy was splitting into groups like water separating into different streams. The Ancients' coalition formed around matriarch Thesia. 10 species joined her, all of them older than most stars in the sky. They sat on their platforms with calm certainty, speaking of patience and experience. To them, the younger species were like children playing with dangerous toys. How could beings who had only existed for a few thousand years understand the deep currents of galactic politics? The Technocratic Alliance gathered behind Ambassador Krell. These were the species who loved efficiency, who trusted numbers and calculations more than emotions. They spoke in percentages and optimization curves. They showed simulations of how their leadership would improve everything from food distribution to energy production. 14 species joined them, all convinced that logic was the only true path. The Dominion block clustered around War Master Bruthen. 8 species, all of them strong, all of them with powerful militaries. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Their weapons and warships spoke for them. In a dangerous galaxy, they argued, only force could guarantee safety. And then there were the others, 15 smaller species who formed what they called the Harmony Collective. They were the ones no one paid much attention to. The Felorians, the Quen, the Nurathi, the Mercian, and others like them. They did not have ancient wisdom or advanced technology or powerful armies. They just wanted a voice in their own future. By the third day, the presentation stopped being about visions for the galaxy. They became attacks. The Silcathi speak of wisdom, Ambassador Krell said, his crystalline form pulsing with cold light. But let us examine their record. In the outer sectors they administered for the last steward, economic growth was negative 3.7%. Why? Because they moved too slowly. They valued tradition over innovation. They let opportunities pass while they debated and reflected. This is not wisdom. This is paralysis. Matriarch Thessia's scales rippled with anger, but her voice remained calm. The Vornth speak of efficiency, but they forget that living beings are not machines. On Colony World Theta 9, Vornth administrators implemented efficiency protocols that eliminated cultural festivals because they were non-productive time. The result? 3 riots, 17 deaths, and eventual economic collapse because the people lost their will to work. You cannot optimize away the soul of a civilization. War Master Bruthen stood, his massive frame dominating the chamber. Both of you missed the point. The galaxy does not need wise words or efficient systems. It needs strength. Last cycle, pirates attacked the Pelion system. The local government asked for help. The Lumini debated for 6 weeks about the appropriate response. By then, 3 colonies were destroyed. If the Draken had been stewards, we would have responded in 6 hours, not 6 weeks. The pirates would be dead. The colonies would be safe. This is what leadership means. The Harmony Collective tried to speak, but their voices were drowned out. The Felorian delegate, a being called Skith with compound eyes and clicking mandibles, managed to get the Arbiter's attention. We propose shared leadership, a council of multiple species where no single voice dominates. The 3 major factions barely acknowledged the suggestion. Matriarch Thessia simply said, well-intentioned but naive. Ambassador Krell calculated it would reduce decision efficiency by 42%. War Master Bruthen did not even respond. Tai Yang watched all of this from his quiet platform. He did not speak. He did not present. When other delegates looked his way, wondering when the humans would make their case, he simply smiled and shook his head. Not yet. Instead, he did something different. During the breaks, when species gathered in small groups to argue and plot, Taeyang walked. He moved through the corridors of Harmony 7 Station, visiting the different delegation quarters. He found Skith sitting alone in the Felorian quarters, antenna drooping with frustration. Ambassador Taeyang, Skith clicked. Have you come to present your species' case for stewardship? No, Taeyang said, settling into a chair that creaked under even his modest weight. I came to ask what you need. Skith's compound eyes blinked. What I need? Yes, not what you think about governance or who should lead. What does your species actually need from whoever becomes steward? For a moment, Skith did not speak. Then the words came pouring out. We need to be heard. The Felorians are not powerful or ancient or brilliant, but we are here. We are part of this galaxy. When decisions are made, they affect us, but no one asks us what we think. We just want someone to listen before they decide our fate. Taeyang nodded and took notes. He visited the Quen next. They were crystalline beings similar to the Vornth but smaller, simpler. They communicated through pulses of light, which Taeyang's translator converted to text. Their leader, a being whose name translated to Bright Echo, pulsed out their concerns. Our worlds contain rare crystals. Very valuable. Every cycle, more species want mining rights. They see our caves as resources, not as sacred spaces. We need a steward who will protect our homes, not just calculate their mineral worth. Taeyang wrote it all down. The Nurathi were slow-moving plant beings who thought in seasons rather than days. Their representative, an ancient tree-like creature named Sola, spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. We reproduce slowly. 1 generation every century. Fast-breeding species expand quickly, claiming worlds we were planning to settle in 200 years. We need a steward who understands that not all species move at the same pace. More notes. More listening. The Mercian lived in water spheres, their dolphin-like bodies graceful in the liquid. Their delegate Kiro spoke through vibrations that rippled through the water. The air breathers see our ocean worlds and call them undeveloped. They want to drain them, terraform them, make them useful. They do not understand that our oceans are already developed, already full of life and culture. We need protection from those who cannot see value in what they cannot breathe. Taeyang visited 15 species over 3 days. He drank strange beverages in alien atmospheres. He listened to concerns about trade routes and cultural preservation, about military protection and resource rights, about being forgotten and being exploited. Hana followed him on some of these visits. After the 10th conversation, she pulled him aside. You are building a database of grievances. Why? Not grievances, Tae-yang corrected. Needs, there is a difference. Are you preparing our presentation now? No. I am preparing to understand what the galaxy actually requires. He looked back toward the council chamber. All those powerful species in there are talking about what they can provide. None of them are asking what is actually needed. And what is needed? Tae-yang smiled slightly. To be heard. To be considered. To know that when decisions are made, someone actually thought about how it would affect them. It is simple, really. On the 5th day, everything came to a head. The 3 major factions had hardened their positions. The Ancients' coalition insisted only wisdom could guide the galaxy. The Technocratic Alliance maintained only logic and efficiency would work. The Dominion bloc declared only strength could maintain order. The Arbiter attempted to facilitate compromise. Perhaps a combination? A council representing all 3 philosophies? Impossible, Ambassador Krell stated. Efficiency cannot coexist with slow deliberation. Agreed, Matriarch Thesia said. Wisdom cannot be rushed by those obsessed with speed. Pointless, War Master Bruthen growled. A divided command structure invites disaster. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species shouted across the void. Translation fields struggled to keep up with the flood of languages. The smaller species of the Harmony Collective tried to speak but were ignored. The careful order of the assembly was breaking down. The Arbiter's voice cut through the chaos, amplified to override all others. If consensus cannot be reached, we must invoke the trial of worthiness. Each faction will undergo challenges to prove their capability. This process may take decades. Silence fell. Decades. The galaxy could not function without clear stewardship for decades. Trade agreements would expire. Security protocols would lapse. Thousands of decisions requiring steward authority would be frozen. Into that silence, Tae-yang stood. His movement was quiet, but somehow everyone noticed. The human delegate, who had sat silent for 5 days, was finally standing. I request permission to speak, he said, his voice calm and clear. The Arbiter's hologram turned toward him. The human delegation has not yet presented their case. You may proceed. Matriarch Thesia made a sound like water over rocks, almost amused. The Vornth's lights pulsed with what might have been curiosity. War Master Bruthen simply stared, his massive eyes unreadable. Tae-yang stepped to the center of his platform, where the light would carry his image to every corner of the sphere. Hana activated their display systems, ready to show whatever he had prepared. But Tae-yang did not start with grand claims or impressive data. He started with a question. Has anyone, he said softly, asked what the galaxy actually needs? The question hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck. The chamber was completely silent. Every delegate, every species, every representative from 47 worlds stopped and looked at the human standing calmly on his modest platform. What do you mean? Ambassador Krell asked, his crystalline form tilting slightly. Tae-yang looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. For 5 days I have listened to each of you explain why your species deserves to be steward. The ancients speak of their wisdom. The technocrats show their efficiency. The military powers demonstrate their strength. All of you have presented excellent reasons why you should lead. He paused. But no one has asked what the trillion souls across 10,000 worlds actually need from their leader. Matriarch Thesia's scales rippled. We know what they need. They need wise guidance. They need efficient systems, Ambassador Krell added. They need protection, War Master Bruthen stated. Tae-yang nodded. Yes, they need all of those things. But they need something else too, something none of you have mentioned. They need to be asked. They need to be heard. They need to know that their steward actually cares what they think. He gestured to Hana, who activated their display. Images appeared in the air above the human platform. Not graphs or military strength comparisons. Pictures of ordinary beings from dozens of worlds. A Felorian worker in a factory. A Quen child exploring crystal caves. A Narathi elder tending ancient groves. A Mercian family swimming through coral cities. Humans have been in the Galactic Alliance for 140 years, Tae-yang continued. We are newcomers. We are not ancient like the Silkathi. We are not efficient like the Vornth. We are not strong like the Dracon. In every measure you use to judge worthiness, we fall short. Then why are you speaking? Bruthen asked, his voice a low rumble. Because humanity has learned something through our bloodiest centuries, something we paid for with the lives of billions. We learned that sustainable governance requires 3 things. consent, adaptation, and the acknowledgement that no single perspective holds all answers. Taeyang began to walk slowly around his platform. My species has a long history of empires. We built them again and again. The Romans conquered the known world and ruled for centuries. The Mongols swept across continents. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the planet. Every one of them fell. Do you know why? No one answered, because they all made the same mistake. They believed that their way was the only way. They believed that their perspective was correct and everyone else was wrong. They tried to rule through force or tradition or superiority, and every single one of them collapsed under the weight of their own certainty. The images changed. Now they showed human history. Ancient empires rising and falling, wars that destroyed entire civilizations, the mushroom clouds of nuclear weapons, the devastation of global conflicts. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Taeyang said quietly. Multiple times. We came so close to extinction that for a while, only a few thousand humans remained alive on our entire planet. We survived not because we were strong or wise or efficient. We survived because finally we learned to listen to each other. Ambassador Krell's lights pulsed. Human history is not relevant to galactic governance, isn't it? Taeyang asked. The problems are the same, just bigger. How do you govern diverse peoples with different needs? How do you make decisions that affect billions? How do you prevent conflict between groups that see the world differently? He stopped walking and faced the center of the chamber. Humans do not claim we should be steward. We are not qualified, but we propose a different answer to the question of who should lead. And what is that answer? Matriarch Thesia asked, her ancient eyes focused on him. No one, Taeyang said simply. No single species should hold permanent power over the galaxy. The chamber erupted in confused voices. The Arbiter had to amplify its tone to restore order. When silence returned, Taeyang continued. We propose the Rotational Stewardship Council. Not a single leader, but a council of 7 species serving together. Each council serves for 100 years, then rotates to new species. This ensures that every species eventually has the opportunity to guide the galaxy. It ensures that no single perspective dominates forever. It ensures that power is not something you hold, but something you earn again and again through service. Hana transmitted documents to all delegates. The details of the proposal appeared on screens across the chamber. Species began reading, their reactions varying wildly. This is chaos, Ambassador Krell stated flatly. 7 species trying to make decisions together? Our calculations show this would reduce efficiency by 42%. Efficiency at what cost? Taeyang asked. The Vornth optimize for productivity, but living beings are not machines. Sometimes inefficiency is the price of actually understanding the problem before you solve it. Matriarch Thesia studied the proposal. 100 years is nothing. Our species measures time in millennia. How can wisdom be conveyed in such short periods? By teaching instead of ruling, Taeyang answered. Each council includes species from different perspectives. Ancient species serve alongside young ones. Technological species work with traditional ones. Military powers cooperate with peaceful species. Wisdom is not hoarded. It is shared. War Master Bruthen stood, his massive frame radiating disapproval. This is weakness disguised as cooperation. A council cannot make swift military decisions. When threats emerge, we need clear command, not debate. You are right, Taeyang agreed, surprising everyone, which is why the proposal includes emergency protocols. In crisis situations, the council can delegate authority to act quickly. But after the crisis, they must report and be accountable. Power is granted temporarily, not seized permanently. He looked around the chamber. You call this weak. I call it anti-fragile. You call it chaos. I call it resilient. You call it naive. I call it the only system that has actually worked for humanity in the long term. New images appeared. The United Earth Government, humanity's first successful global leadership. Not a single nation dominating, but a rotating council where every region had a voice. It was messy and slow and often frustrating, but it had kept peace on Earth for over a century. We did not figure this out because we are smart, Taeyang said. We figured it out because we failed at everything else first. We tried rule by the strongest. We tried rule by the wisest. We tried rule by the most advanced. Every single approach led to collapse because people who are not consulted eventually rebel. People who are not heard eventually fight. Consent cannot be assumed. It must be earned continuously. Skith, the Felorian delegate, spoke up. This proposal gives smaller species equal representation. Yes, Taiyang confirmed. 7 council seats. They rotate based on need and expertise, not just power. A small species with unique knowledge about their region might serve alongside a major power. A young species with fresh perspectives sits with ancient species carrying historical wisdom. No one is excluded because they lack military strength or age or technology. Impossible, Matriarch Thesia said. The major powers will never agree to limit themselves. Then I suppose we will see, Taeyang replied calmly. If wisdom truly means learning from others' mistakes, or just accumulating years while repeating your own. The insult was subtle but clear. Thesia's scales flushed darker. Around the chamber, reactions varied. The smaller species of the Harmony Collective were reading the proposal with growing excitement. The major powers looked skeptical or outright hostile. Ambassador Krell ran calculations, his internal lights flickering rapidly. Even with emergency protocols, this system introduces unacceptable delays in normal governance. Compared to what? Taeyang asked. Compared to the trial of worthiness that will take decades? Compared to civil war if species refuse to accept a single ruler? Compared to the collapse of the alliance entirely? Sometimes the stable solution is not the efficient one. War Master Bruthen growled. You speak well for a species that has barely left your home system. But words are not strength. How would this council enforce its decisions? How would it maintain order? The same way any government does, Taeyang said. Through legitimacy, people follow laws they believe are fair. They resist laws they think are unjust. A council representing multiple species has more legitimacy than a single species rule. More legitimacy means less need for force. Pretty theory, Bruthen rumbled. Reality is harsher. Yes, Taeyang agreed. Which is why the proposal includes a unified defense command that serves the council, not individual species. Military power exists, but it is accountable to diverse leadership, not just those who possess it. The debate raged for hours. Species questioned every detail. The Vornth found logical problems. The Silcathi pointed out historical examples of failed councils. The Dracon insisted it could not work in practice. But the smaller species kept asking questions. They wanted to know more. They saw themselves, perhaps for the first time, actually being part of galactic leadership rather than just subjects of it. As the session ended for the day, Taeyang sat down heavily. Hana brought him water. That went well, she said. Or maybe terribly. I cannot tell. Both, Taeyang said. The major powers hate it. The minor species love it. Now we see which matters more. The voice of the strong or the voices of the many. That night, as delegates returned to their quarters, conversations continued in corridors and meeting rooms. The galaxy had been presented with a choice it had never considered before. Not which species should rule, but whether any species should rule alone. In the human quarters, Taeyang reviewed messages. Dozens of smaller species wanted to meet with him, to discuss the proposal further. The major powers were silent, which worried him more than outright rejection. They are plotting something, Hana said. Of course they are, Taeyang replied. They have held power for so long that the idea of sharing it seems impossible to them. We have challenged their entire worldview. Can we win? Taeyang looked at her. This is not about winning. It is about offering a better question. We cannot force them to choose our answer. We can only show them that the question they are asking leads nowhere good. Outside the window, Harmony 7 Station orbited in the darkness between stars, holding within it the future of the galaxy. The debate had only just begun. The meeting room was private, shielded from listening devices and observation. 3 species who had spent the past week arguing against each other now sat together at the same table. Ambassador Krell's crystalline form reflected the dim lighting. Matriarch Thesia coiled in the center, her scales shifting colors slowly. War Master Bruthen stood because no chair could hold his massive weight. The human proposal is gaining support among the minor species, Krell stated. Our analysis shows 43 species are considering backing it. 43 species who contribute little to galactic security or economy, Bruthen growled. Their support means nothing. It means votes, Thesia corrected. In the Alliance Charter, each species votes equally, regardless of size or power. We pushed for that rule ourselves centuries ago, believing the major powers would always control enough votes to maintain order. Now it may be used against us. Krell's internal lights pulsed as he calculated. If 43 minor species vote together, they form a majority. The three of us combined control only 18 votes. We cannot win a direct contest. The three leaders sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that realization settling over them. Then we change the game, Thesia said finally. We stop fighting each other and present a united front. An alliance? Bruthen asked. Between us? The triumvirate accord, Thesia proposed. Instead of one species ruling, 3 species share power. We divide responsibilities. The Vorinth handle economic and technological matters. The Silcathi guide diplomatic and cultural affairs. The Dracon manage security and defense. We present this as a compromise as 3 perspectives working together. Krell processed the idea. It maintains our power while appearing to embrace cooperation. The minor species cannot complain about single-species rule when 3 major powers share the burden. And it excludes them completely, Bruthen added, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Better for us than the current chaos. They agreed quickly after that. The major powers, so certain they deserved to lead, found common ground in keeping others from power. They would present the triumvirate accord as a generous compromise, a way forward that avoided the inefficiency of the humans' rotating council, while still embracing multiple perspectives. Word of the triumvirate accord spread through the station like fire through dry grass. By morning, every delegate knew that the 3 most powerful species had formed an alliance. The smaller species reacted with anger and fear. In the Felorian quarters, Skith paced frantically. This is exactly what we feared. The strong deciding everything among themselves, leaving the rest of us with no voice at all. In the Quen chambers, lights pulsed in distress. The Nerathi sent messages of concern. The Mercians' water spheres bubbled with agitation. 43 species realized they were about to be shut out entirely from galactic leadership. They gathered in an emergency meeting, filling a large conference room. Skith stood at the front. The triumvirate wants us to accept being ruled by 3 species instead of 1. They call this compromise. I call it the same problem multiplied by 3. What choice do we have? Asked a Nerathi delegate named Sola. The 3 powers control most of the military strength, most of the advanced technology, most of the economic output. If they unite against us, we have no leverage. We have votes, said Cairo, the Mercian representative, his voice rippling through his water sphere. We have numbers. In a fair vote, we can win. If they allow a fair vote, Skith clicked bitterly. The major powers can always find ways to delay or complicate the process. They can make voting conditional on requirements only they can meet. A Quen delegate pulsed a message. What about the human proposal? It offered us representation. The human is 1 voice, Sola said slowly. 1 species. Can he stand against the combined might of 3 major powers? We could ask him, Skith suggested. They sent a message to Te Yang requesting a meeting. He arrived within the hour, alone except for Hana. He looked tired but calm as always. He listened as the 43 species poured out their concerns, their fears, their frustration. When they finished, Te Yang was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The triumvirate accord is smart politics. It neutralizes their conflicts with each other while excluding everyone else. It is exactly what I would do if I wanted to maintain power while appearing reasonable. Then we have lost? Skith asked. No, Te Yang said. We have clarity. Now we know what we are really debating. Not different visions of governance, but whether power should be shared or hoarded. Fine word, said one of the other delegates, a being from a species called the Vexori. But what do we actually do? Te Yang stood and walked to the window overlooking the station's central hub. We do what we have been doing. We talk about what is actually needed. We present the choice clearly. And we trust that when beings see the truth laid out before them, enough will choose the right path. That is hope, not strategy, the Vexori delegate argued. Hope is a strategy, Te Yang replied, turning back to face them, sometimes the only one that works. Over the next days, Tai Yang did not argue publicly against the triumvirate. Instead, he continued his quiet work. He visited delegations not to campaign but to listen. He spent hours in different species' quarters, drinking strange beverages and learning about their worlds. Hana followed him to a meeting with the Quen. Their leader, Bright Echo, pulsed questions about the human proposal. How would the rotational council protect sacred sites like our crystal caves? Taeyang answered carefully. By including species like yours on the council. When beings from your world help make decisions, they bring your perspective, your values, your understanding of what is sacred. Protection does not come from rules imposed from above. It comes from voices heard within the decision-making process. Later, with the Mercian, Kiro asked about ocean world development. The Triumvirate would likely continue seeing our worlds as unused resources. Would the Rotational Council be different? Different how? Taeyang asked, turning the question back. Different because we would be part of it. We would have representatives who could explain why our oceans are not empty, not waiting to be filled with something better. We could make others understand. Yes, Taeyang said simply. That is exactly the point. The Triumvirate's leaders noticed Taeyang's continued activity. They requested a private meeting. It was held in a neutral conference room, just the four of them. Krell, Thessia, Bruthen, and Taeyang. War Master Bruthen spoke first, his voice a low rumble. Your proposal sounds noble, human, but it is a fantasy. The galaxy requires strong guidance, not endless debate among species that cannot agree on anything. Matriarch Thessia's scales rippled in agreement. Experience cannot be rotated like a duty shift. We Silcathi have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. That knowledge, that perspective cannot be replaced by good intentions and fresh faces every century. Ambassador Krell's lights pulsed methodically. Our efficiency analysis shows your rotational council would introduce unacceptable delays in crisis response. When immediate action is needed, a council of 7 species would spend precious time debating while situations deteriorate. Taeyang listened to all of this without interrupting. When they finished, he asked one question. Are you proposing the Triumvirate because it is best for the galaxy, or because you cannot imagine not being in power? The room went silent. The question hung there, sharp and uncomfortable. That is irrelevant, Krell finally stated. Is it? Taeyang asked. Because it seems to me that everything you have said is about maintaining your own positions. You speak of strength and wisdom and efficiency, but you are really talking about keeping control. Bruthen's claws flexed. Careful, human. You are small and weak. Do not mistake our patience for acceptance of insults. It is not an insult, Taeyang said calmly. It is an observation. And here is another one. You cannot sustain rule without consent. He pulled out his tablet and displayed information. 43 species control 73% of the galaxy's rare resource deposits. Felorian worlds produce the polymers that make your ship hulls possible, War Master. Quen crystal caves contain the computational substrates the Vornth networks depend on, Ambassador. Mercian oceans grow the biological components that Silcathi medicine requires, Matriarch. He let that sink in. If those 43 species feel excluded, if they decide they are tired of being ignored, they can strangle your supply chains. Not through military action, just by saying no. They would not dare, Bruthen growled. Would they not? Taeyang asked. 27 species control critical hyperlane junctions. They can make trade difficult without firing a single shot. 18 species possess unique biological or technological capabilities your civilizations use every day. What happens when they stop cooperating? Thessia's eyes narrowed. You are threatening us? No, Taeyang said. I am pointing out reality. You can rule through strength, wisdom, or logic, but you cannot rule sustainably without consent, and consent is not given once and forgotten. It must be earned continuously through legitimate governance. Krell's lights flickered rapidly as he ran new calculations. The numbers Taeyang presented were accurate. The minor species did control crucial resources and locations. Open resistance from them could create chaos even the 3 major powers could not easily resolve. What are you suggesting? Krell asked. I am suggesting that the Triumvirate Accord solves your problem, but not the galaxy's problem. It keeps you in power, but it does not create stable governance. Stable governance requires that those being governed feel they have a voice. Your accord gives them no voice at all. Matriarch Thessia uncoiled slightly. And your rotational council does? It tries to, Taeyang said. It may fail. Systems often do. But at least it starts from the right question. What does the galaxy need? Not what do the powerful deserve? The meeting ended without resolution. As Taeyang left, Thessia called after him. You argue well for someone who claims not to want power, human. Tell me, if your rotational council is adopted, which species would serve first? Taeyang turned back and smiled slightly. That is the point, Matriarch. We do not choose. The council does, based on need and expertise, and humanity would insist on serving last, not first. We propose this not to gain power, but to ensure everyone has the chance to prove themselves worthy of it." He left the three leaders sitting in silence, doubts creeping into their certainty for the first time. The Arbiter's hologram appeared in the center of the council chamber, its voice resonating through the sphere. "The Assembly has reached a critical junction. Two proposals stand before us. The Triumvirate Accord, offered by the Vornth, Silcathi, and Dracon, the Rotational Stewardship Council proposed by humanity. Per the Alliance Charter, all member species hold equal voting rights. Each species will cast one vote. The proposal with the majority will be adopted." Around the chamber, delegates shifted nervously. This was it, the decision that would shape the galaxy for centuries. But Taeyang stood and requested permission to speak first. The Arbiter acknowledged him. Before the vote, Taeyang said, "I wish to propose amendments to the Rotational Council framework. Based on concerns raised during our discussions, I believe improvements can be made." Murmurs rippled through the Assembly. Amending his own proposal now before the vote? It was unusual. Taeyang gestured to Hana, who transmitted updated documents. The Vornth raised valid concerns about efficiency during emergencies. The amended framework includes crisis response protocols. When immediate action is required, the Council can delegate emergency authority to specialized agencies with clear mandates. They act swiftly, but they must report back and be held accountable when the crisis passes. Ambassador Krell studied the amendment, his lights pulsing as he processed it. The emergency protocols were actually well designed. They addressed his primary concern about slow decision-making during critical events. The Silcathi spoke about the importance of historical wisdom. Taeyang continued. The amendment creates a Council of Elders, an advisory body composed of the oldest species. They do not hold executive power, but they are formally consulted on major decisions. Their experience becomes a resource, not a weapon. Their wisdom is shared, not hoarded. Matriarch Thessia's scales rippled with something that might have been surprise. The amendment actually honored what she had been arguing for, just in a different form. The Dracon emphasized security needs, Taeyang said. The amendment establishes a unified defense command that serves the Council but operates with military efficiency. No committee interference in tactical decisions, but clear civilian oversight of strategic choices. Warriors lead warriors, but they do so in service to the whole galaxy, not individual species. Warmaster Bruthen was silent, but his tail stopped its agitated movement. The proposal actually respected military necessity while maintaining accountability. These amendments demonstrate what the Rotational Council is designed to do, Taeyang said. It adapts. It incorporates different perspectives. It learns and improves. We are not trying to win an argument. We are trying to build a system that works. He sat down. The chamber was quiet as species absorbed the changes. Then Ambassador Krell did something unexpected. He stood and requested to speak. The Vornth have completed analysis of the amended proposal, he stated. With the crisis response protocols, efficiency loss drops to 11% within acceptable parameters. Logic suggests that a system which can adapt before implementation will continue to adapt during implementation. He paused, his crystalline form catching the light. The Vornth Collective will support the Rotational Stewardship Council on one condition. The chamber held its breath. The first council must include representation from all major governing philosophies. Ancient wisdom, technological efficiency, and military security must each have seats, alongside species representing other perspectives. Balance from the beginning, Taeyang stood again. Agreed. The first council should reflect the full spectrum of galactic governance. I accept that condition. Gasps and surprise clicks echoed through the chamber. One of the three major powers had broken from the Triumvirate. Matriarch Thessia rose next, her long body uncoiling gracefully. The human speaks of learning from mistakes. His species is young, barely 200,000 years old, and has achieved space travel only recently. How can such a young species design a system meant to last millennia? Taeyang met her gaze. We cannot, Matriarch. That is why we need you. The Rotational Council is not built on human wisdom. It is built on human mistakes. We learned through failure that no single perspective endures forever, that no empire lasts when built on domination. We need your wisdom in the Council. The question is whether you trust the system enough to serve within it, rather than above it. Thessia was silent for a long time. Her ancient eyes studied the human standing calmly before the assembled galaxy. Finally, she spoke. Perhaps the wisdom we have accumulated over 47,000 years should be shared, not used as justification for permanent rule. Perhaps age has made us arrogant, believing that only we can guide others. Perhaps it is time to teach rather than command. She lowered her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement among her species. The Silcathi will support the Rotational Council, not because it is perfect, but because it is honest. It admits that no one holds all the answers. That is wiser than we have been in a very long time. 2 down, 1 to go. All eyes turned to War Master Bruthen. The massive Drakon had remained still as stone throughout these exchanges. Now he rose to his full height, dominating the chamber. The Drakon do not make decisions lightly, he rumbled. We value strength. We respect power. For 10,000 years we have protected the weak through our military might. We have never failed in this duty. He turned to face Taeyang directly. Human. You propose a system where warriors serve councils, where military decisions pass through civilian oversight. This goes against everything my species believes. We think this makes the galaxy weaker, not stronger. Taeyang said nothing, waiting. But, Bruthen continued, the Drakon also respect courage. You have courage, human. You stand before the assembled galaxy, representing a small species with no real power, and you challenge the way things have always been done. You do not claim to be better than us. You claim we can all be better together. He paused. I wish to test this claim. I invoke the trial of understanding, a Drakon ritual where opponents face each other to comprehend their true strength. Taeyang nodded slowly. I accept. The trial took place in an arena aboard the station. Delegates gathered to watch. The rules were simple, a physical contest not to death but to demonstrate capability. Taeyang stood in the arena in simple clothing. He was in his 40s, fit but not a warrior. Across from him, War Master Bruthen towered, his scales gleaming like armor, his claws sharp as blades. When the trial began, Bruthen could have ended it in seconds. His strength was overwhelming. But Taeyang did not try to match strength with strength. He moved quickly, using strategy instead of force. He dodged and adapted, finding angles, using the environment. He fought like someone who knew he could not win through power. So he won through thinking. He still lost. Bruthen was simply too strong, too experienced. Within minutes, Taeyang was on the ground, bleeding from several cuts. But Bruthen did not roar in victory. Instead, he extended a massive claw and helped the human stand. You fight like prey trying to survive a predator, Bruthen said. Taeyang wiped blood from his face and nodded. Yes, because humanity was prey for most of our existence. We were not the strongest or fastest. We survived through cooperation, through adaptation, through learning from every threat. That is what the Rotational Council offers. Not the dominance of the strong, but the survival of all through diversity of approach. Bruthen stared at him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he inclined his head. The Drakon respects strength. But perhaps we have confused strength with domination for too long. There is strength in what you propose. The strength to restrain oneself for the greater whole. The strength to serve rather than rule. He turned to address the watching delegates. The Drakon will support the Rotational Council. The triumvirate accord was dead. All 3 major powers now stood with the human proposal. The formal vote came the next day. One by one, species announced their decisions. The 43 smaller species voted for the Rotational Council, finally seeing a path to representation. With the major powers now in support, the momentum was unstoppable. Final tally, 44 species for the Rotational Council. 2 species voted to maintain the status quo, preferring no change. 1 species abstained, still uncertain. The proposal passed. The arbiter announced the formation of the first Rotational Stewardship Council. 7 seats would be filled through lottery among species who volunteered, with the requirement that the council reflect diverse governing philosophies. The lottery was held immediately. The 7 seats filled, Silcathi, representing ancient wisdom, Forth bringing technological efficiency, Drakon providing military security, Felorian offering collective cooperation, Quen ensuring resource ethics, Mercian protecting environmental balance, Narathi preserving biological diversity. Humanity was not selected for the first council. Taeyang watched the announcement from the human platform, and he smiled with genuine satisfaction. A week later, the station prepared for the inauguration of the first council. Delegates prepared to depart, returning to their worlds with news of the new era. Matriarch Thesia found Tae-Yang in one of the observation lounges looking out at the stars. "Your species will serve eventually," she said, coiling next to him. "When humans join the council, what will you bring?" Tae-Yang considered the question. Probably mistakes. New ones, hopefully, but also the willingness to admit them and learn. That is all we have ever had. Thesia made the sound like water over rocks that was her version of laughter. Perhaps that is enough. The galaxy debated which species could rule. You showed us the question itself was wrong. The galaxy does not need rulers. It needs stewards who remember they are temporary. Will it work? Tae-Yang asked. It will work until it does not, Thesia replied. Then the council will fix it. That is the point, is it not? Not perfection, but continuous improvement through diverse perspective. Yes, Tae-Yang agreed. That is exactly the point. Hana joined them carrying data tablets. The transport is ready. Time to go home. As they walked toward the docking bay, they passed the council chamber one last time. Inside, the 7 members of the first rotational council were already meeting, beginning the work of governing a galaxy. It was messy. They argued about procedure. They disagreed on priorities. The Vornth wanted to start with economic optimization. The Silkathi insisted on diplomatic outreach. The Draken pushed for security assessments. The smaller species advocated for their various concerns. But they were talking. They were listening. They were learning to work together. Tae-Yang and Hana boarded their ship. As it undocked from Harmony 7 station, Tae-Yang looked back at the massive sphere hanging in space. Do you think they will remember what we did here? Hana asked. Tae-Yang shook his head. They will not remember that humans proposed the council. They will remember that the galaxy chose to govern itself together. That is better. The ship turned and accelerated toward the hyperlane that would take them home. Behind them, the Galactic Alliance embarked on a new era. Not under the rule of the strongest, wisest, or most logical species. Not under a triumvirate of major powers. Under a system that assumed no one had all the answers. A system that gave everyone the chance to contribute theirs. A system built not on the certainty of empires but on the humility of learning. The human had calmly spoken up and the galaxy had learned to listen. And in listening, it had discovered something humans had learned through centuries of bloodshed and failure. That the strength to admit you do not have all the answers is greater than the pride that claims you do. The galaxy would stumble. It would make mistakes. The rotational council would face crises and challenges. Some councils would govern well. Others would struggle. There would be calls to return to the old ways, to put one strong species back in charge. But the principle had been established. Power was not something you held forever. It was something you earned through service, proved through results, and surrendered when your time came. Whether the system lasted 10 years or 10,000, Tae-Yang did not know. But he knew they had given the galaxy something it had never had before. A choice, a chance, a different way forward. Sometimes that was enough.